Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of 1 Samuel. Today we are looking at 1 Samuel chapter 5. Yesterday we went through and read the chapter. It's short, it's only about 12 verses. And so our discussions and our lessons from this chapter are not necessarily going to be deep and heavily philosophical either. But I want us to look at some things as we consider chapter 5 that will help us not just in understanding this chapter, but will also help us in understanding later sections of the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel as well. And so we want to look at some of the background today of the Philistines. Who were they? And who was this god Dagon that was being discussed? And then we'll delve into a little bit of some of the things that we see here in 1 Samuel chapter 5 at the close of our lessons today. But let's begin with Dagon. Who was Dagon? Well, Dagon was known as the fish god of the Philistines, and he's called the fish god because he was half man, half fish as far as the idols of him. He would have the torso, the upper body, the head and the hands of a man, and the lower body or the tail of a fish. And oftentimes when he is depicted as sitting upright with his tail hanging back underneath him, as far as that goes. And so when you see that depiction in 1 Samuel 5 of him falling forward on his face, it's almost as though he tips over from the lower half, the fish part on which he sits, falls forward onto his head and hands, and they're going to break off in the midst of the fall. And so that's what you see with Dagon. Dagon was the Philistine god, it's believed to be, of fertility, that they would worship for that particular purpose. And so the Ark of the Covenant is going to be brought in as it's been captured in battle and brought into the temple of Dagon. And yet it's going to have this great calamity that is going to follow it everywhere it goes as God strikes the Philistines for their actions. The second lesson I want us to pull from this chapter is about the Philistines themselves, because there are 5 cities of the Philistines that are going to be the central framework for the Philistine people. Those cities are Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. If you'll remember from chapter 5, 3 of those 5 cities are going to be mentioned in this chapter. The ark is going to go first to Ashdod, and then to Gath, and then to Ekron. Or at least they're going to try to send it to Ekron. And Ekron is going to reject it and say, just give it back to the people of Israel where it belongs. These 5 cities are ones that would be ruled by the lords of the Philistines. Now, these are not the only 5 cities or areas of the Philistines, but they are their major cities. And they are the ones that their lords ruled over. There are many ways, based upon the information that we have, in which the Philistines are more of a tribal people than necessarily one national government, in that each city would have its own lords, and they would somewhat rule independently, though cooperatively, amongst the people of the Philistines. And though often depicted in many ways as being almost these barbaric people in a lot of ways, a lot of the archaeological evidence suggests otherwise in the things that have been seen and uncovered about the Philistines. And so you have these 5 major cities. And as the ark comes into them, we see this calamity that unfolds. The people are overtaken with tumors. Dagon is going to fall over and be broken and be shattered by the impacts that are undertaken, not just once, but on multiple occasions. And the Philistines are eventually going to say, send away the ark. When they try to bring it to Ekron, the people come back and they say, listen, we're not letting it in. We don't want it. Give it back to the Israelites because their God is absolutely destroying us. Which is an interesting admission to make. Remember when you go back into chapter 4, they were afraid of the God of Israel. They were afraid of what he could do and the impact that he would have and things of that nature. And then they capture the ark, and they think they have control over the God of Israel, except they have nothing of the kind. And so they are eventually going to say, send their God away. We recognize God was not in the Ark of the Covenant, but rather that it is simply a matter of God utilizing his power in the place where the Ark of the Covenant was. But at the same time, the people saw it differently. And the people were scared to death of the Ark. And they were scared to death of God, because they knew what it was that he could do, and they knew what it was he was doing. There is not for a moment the thought that these things are all just circumstantial. They believed that the God of Israel had power. He had shown it over and over again, and would show it many times over in the future to them. And yet it wasn't enough to make them believe. It was enough to try to make them send away the God of the Israelites. You know, there's many people today that would prefer to just send God away than to put their faith and their trust in him and follow him, much like the Philistines do. And yet trying to do that is also going to be a losing battle, just as it was for the Philistines. These are some of the things that I found in looking at chapter 5. I hope that they are things that are useful to you and of interest to you. Next time, we will come back and we will begin examining chapter 6. But until then, have a great day.